In the spring of 1941, Berlin was a city of shadows and whispers. The Reich, tightly controlled by Adolf Hitler and his inner circle, was orchestrating campaigns that stretched across Europe, from the Blitzkrieg in France to the looming threat of Operation Barbarossa in the East. Amid this climate of tension and secrecy, an unlikely figure moved silently through the corridors of power, a secretary assigned to Hitler's personal office, tasked with organizing his schedules, transcribing sensitive communications, and managing files that few outside the inner circle were ever permitted to see. Her work appeared mundane, even bureaucratic, but within those pages lay threads of history few would understand until decades later. She was officially identified only as a clerk in archival records, yet her access granted her the ability to witness the gears of the Nazi machine up close. Daily, she observed the flow of orders to generals on the Eastern Front, memoranda regarding occupied territories, and the meticulous planning of propaganda campaigns aimed at controlling both the German populace and foreign perception. At the time, few outside Hitler's personal adjutants or the SS understood the true scope of the information she encountered. But she began to notice patterns, documents that hinted at covert operations, sudden disappearances of key staff, and internal memos contradicting public proclamations. By April 1941, intelligence reports indicate that German preparations for the invasion of the Soviet Union were accelerating. Units like the 6th Army and Panzer Group 3 were mobilizing along the eastern border, with meticulous attention to supply lines and air support from the Luftwaffe. From her desk in the Reich Chancellery, she observed the shuffle of officers and saw the subtle ways in which Hitler's aides tried to keep certain operational details from leaking even to high-ranking generals. One day, she recorded in her small notebook, "Orders move like shadows. Even the strongest officers do not know where the truth rests." The human dimension of her work was fraught with risk. Secretaries were expected to maintain absolute discretion, yet they were not immune to the paranoia that permeated the Nazi hierarchy. Gestapo inspections and the constant fear of being accused of disloyalty created an atmosphere of tension that was almost suffocating. It was within this environment that she became quietly observant, cataloging discrepancies between official directives and actual events on the front. Her notes included details such as troop deployments to Smolensk and Kiev, sometimes contradicting what was reported in the propaganda of the Völkischer Beobachter newspaper. These inconsistencies would later become invaluable for Allied analysts seeking to understand the true intentions and mistakes of the German High Command. Her proximity to high-level discussions also exposed her to information about the Reich's political machinations. In May 1941, Germany formalized alliances and prepared to negotiate with Vichy France and other occupied nations. She documented the sudden disappearances of several department heads within the Chancellery, individuals whose fates were never clearly recorded, vanished without explanation, their positions quietly filled by others. Her notes suggested that internal purges and the suppression of dissent were not confined to the SS or Gestapo but extended into civilian administrative offices as well. These observations, seemingly trivial at the moment, formed a tapestry of intrigue that historians would struggle to untangle for decades. Yet amid these weighty responsibilities, life in Berlin continued in stark contrast. Tram lines hummed along the streets, cafes remained cautiously open, and ordinary citizens tried to ignore the ever-present threat of Allied bombing. She moved through this duality with a kind of practiced invisibility, carrying a bundle of sensitive documents each day, fully aware that any misstep could be fatal. Occasionally, she would overhear discussions about covert operations, including the mysterious Sonderkommando assignments that were never publicly acknowledged. Each passing day made her increasingly aware of the delicate balance she was maintaining between duty, survival, and the moral questions that gnawed at her conscience. By the end of spring 1941, the threads of history were tightening around her. The plans for Barbarossa were reaching completion, while the shadows within the Chancellery grew longer with each passing week. Her meticulous notes hinted at a broader story of secret maneuvers and internal disappearances, a hidden network of intelligence that few would ever document. She was standing at the threshold of knowledge that could alter the understanding of Hitler's inner workings, but whether it would ever survive the war remained uncertain. And so, as the city of Berlin hummed with both industry and dread, a single question lingered. What would become of the secret pages she kept so carefully hidden, and who, if anyone, would ever read them? By late 1942, The war had escalated into a global struggle, with Axis and Allied forces locked in brutal campaigns across multiple continents. In Europe, the German Wehrmacht was beginning to feel the strain of prolonged engagement on both the Eastern and Western fronts. The British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, had intensified its efforts to infiltrate the Reich and identify potential informants within Hitler's inner circle. Among the thousands of civilians, clerks and bureaucrats working for the Third Reich, one secretary's access had quietly drawn the attention of Allied intelligence officers, though at the time, they could only speculate about her true significance. In London, SOE analysts pored over intercepted communications and coded transmissions from occupied Europe. Reports indicated that certain German offices had leaks, documents that contradicted public orders and intelligence intercepts. Yet no one could pinpoint the source. Back in Berlin, the secretary continued her work in the Reich Chancellery, transcribing messages, organizing sensitive documents, and silently observing the comings and goings of high-ranking officials. Her records began to reveal subtle inconsistencies, orders for troop movements that never arrived at their intended divisions, missing reports from the Eastern Front, and personnel transfers that went unannounced. She noted in her diary, "Some things vanish before my eyes, as though the walls themselves consume them." The human struggle she faced was growing more acute. By September 1942, the Battle of Stalingrad had begun in earnest, and the Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, was moving into positions that would later become infamous for encirclement and destruction. The Reich Chancellery, far removed from the front lines, was still a place of tension. Officers whispered of failures, and Hitler's aides displayed visible unease when delivering orders that contradicted frontline realities. The secretary, sitting in her quiet office, noticed discrepancies between operational plans and what was being reported by the military high command. Even the Gestapo, normally focused on political enemies, seemed concerned with these inconsistencies, though no one publicly acknowledged them. The insight gained from her position went beyond military operations. She observed the inner politics of the Reich, the subtle purges of officials deemed unreliable, and the manner in which power was maintained through fear and secrecy. Some memos she transcribed mentioned units such as the Luftwaffe's Fliegerkorps and Waffen-SS detachments tasked with maintaining internal order, but without specifying their true missions. Her notes hinted at activities never fully recorded in historical archives, including the disappearance of administrative officers and the reassignment of their duties without explanation. One line she scribbled read, "Not all who vanish are gone. Some are shadows among shadows." By late 1942, the SOE had begun actively targeting German clerical staff for recruitment or observation, recognizing that those with access to Hitler's office held potentially invaluable intelligence. The secretary's subtle behaviors, staying late to organize files, taking meticulous notes in her personal ledger, and displaying an unusual attention to inconsistencies, made her presence both invaluable and precarious. Allied operatives understood that a single clerk could provide insight into troop movements, strategic decisions, and even covert operations that were otherwise invisible to external eyes. Yet the stakes were immense. Any suspicion by the Gestapo or SS could result in immediate arrest or execution. Her life was a careful negotiation of observation and discretion, each day a silent battle of survival. The risk was heightened by the internal paranoia of the Nazi leadership, who increasingly distrusted even their most loyal subordinates. Orders were given verbally when possible, and documents were shredded, burned, or transferred in a constant effort to maintain secrecy. She had become acutely aware of the fragility of the truth, understanding that what she recorded could easily be lost forever. By December 1942, as the winter closed in over Berlin and the Eastern Front froze under brutal conditions, the secretary's personal ledger contained the most detailed record of anomalies within Hitler's administration known to exist. The Allies, meanwhile, were still piecing together their intelligence, unaware that someone inside Berlin was quietly documenting events that might later rewrite the understanding of German internal operations. Every day she continued to note discrepancies, cryptic orders, and the fates of those who disappeared quietly from the bureaucracy. The question that hung over her work, and over the unfolding war, remained unresolved. Would her observations survive the coming collapse, and would anyone ever fully understand the web of secrets she was silently recording? In early 1943, the war in Europe had reached a critical turning point. The German Sixth Army was encircled in Stalingrad, and reports of catastrophic losses began filtering back to Berlin. Amidst the chaos of the Eastern Front, the Reich Chancellery in the heart of the capital remained an island of controlled precision, though tensions ran high. For Hitler's secretary, these were perilous months. Her office, once a quiet space of routine clerical work, had become a vantage point for observing a regime under increasing stress. She recorded, almost in disbelief, the sudden absences of high-ranking staff, generals, bureaucrats, and even Hitler's close aides who vanished without explanation, leaving gaps that were swiftly filled but never acknowledged. The struggle she faced was both psychological and practical. Orders from the front arrived inconsistently, often contradicting earlier directives. Messengers from the Eastern Front reported positions and losses that did not match the meticulously typed communications in her office. Units such as Panzer Group 4 and the 17th Army moved in patterns that seemed erratic, yet were meticulously documented in the Chancellery's files. The secretary began cross-referencing dates and directives, noting discrepancies between what Hitler demanded and what the army could realistically execute. Her small notebook became a repository for secrets, both military and bureaucratic, that were otherwise untraceable, a silent witness to contradictions that could have altered the course of operations. Amid this human and tactical struggle, she observed firsthand the internal paranoia that had overtaken the Reich. Memoirs and diaries of contemporaries later noted the pervasive fear inside Hitler's offices, describing a culture where even a minor clerical error could be interpreted as sabotage. The secretary, fully aware of this, took extraordinary measures to remain invisible while meticulously preserving her records. She wrote in her diary, "The walls have ears, yet they do not see. The ink may betray what my voice cannot." Her awareness of danger was heightened by rumors of disappearances tied not to the front lines but to administrative errors, perceived disloyalty, or whispered allegations within the Nazi bureaucracy. The reveal of her growing understanding became evident in the cryptic details she documented about the disappearances of prominent officials. One entry noted a senior logistics officer who had been reassigned ostensibly to Berlin's military district command, only to vanish weeks later without formal explanation. Another referenced a series of coded communications between the Reich Chancellery and the SS main office concerning sudden transfers of personnel, which historians now speculate may have involved purges or extrajudicial actions. Each observation raised questions about the extent to which Hitler's inner circle was operating in secrecy, even from its own high-ranking members. The secretary's ledger, though modest in appearance, began to read like a map of hidden operations and shadowed disappearances. By early spring 1943, the secretary's knowledge had expanded to include not only operational anomalies but hints of covert negotiations. Some memoranda suggested clandestine overtures to neutral or occupied states, plans that were never publicly acknowledged. For example, she noted briefings regarding liaison officers sent to Spain and Sweden, countries officially neutral yet strategically significant for intelligence gathering and resource allocation. These observations illustrated a complex web of strategy and secrecy, much of which was lost to public record or buried in post-war analyses. Her awareness of this hidden world underscored the fragility of knowledge in wartime. One misstep could mean both personal danger and the erasure of history. Despite the weight of what she recorded, the secretary remained a silent observer, taking no overt action but ensuring that her ledger survived. She understood that each note could become critical evidence for posterity, or be destroyed if discovered. The juxtaposition of immense historical events and her quiet, meticulous documentation created a tension that defined her existence during this period. Her role was at once invisible and indispensable, providing a perspective on the Reich that few outside could comprehend. As the winter of 1943 gave way to spring, Berlin was a city still functioning on the surface while hiding cracks in its foundation. The secretary's ledger had grown into a comprehensive record of internal irregularities, cryptic orders, and unexplained disappearances. The central question now became whether these pages could endure the coming collapse of the Reich, and whether anyone beyond the walls of the Chancellery would ever understand the patterns she had quietly recorded. Each entry hinted at the depth of secrecy within Hitler's administration, leaving a lingering question. How many truths remained hidden, and which of them might one day surface to reshape history. Her story, though silent, was far from over. By mid-1944, the war had reached a critical juncture. Allied forces were meticulously planning Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, while inside Germany, the atmosphere of fear and suspicion within the Reich Chancellery had intensified. The secretary, now fully attuned to the nuances of Hitler's inner circle, continued her work under increasingly perilous conditions. With Berlin subjected to periodic air raids and the government operating under strict secrecy, every document she handled and every note she took was an act of careful defiance against the chaos surrounding her. She recorded in her diary, "The city crumbles outside, yet inside, the lies are neatly stacked in folders no one will read." The human struggle during this period was profound. Officers and staff moved like ghosts through corridors, fearful of scrutiny from both superiors and the ever-watchful Gestapo. The secretary observed subtle purges, sudden reassignments, and whispered accusations that left even senior officials anxious. Within the military sphere, units such as the 12th Army and elements of the Luftwaffe were being redeployed in response to the Allied buildup in Normandy. The orders that reached her desk often contradicted frontline reports, suggesting that miscommunication, panic, or deliberate obfuscation was compromising operational effectiveness. She carefully annotated each discrepancy, knowing that any visible hesitation or error could draw deadly attention. Historical insight into this period reveals the increasing paranoia of Hitler's leadership. Following the failed July 20, 1944, assassination attempt, trust within the Chancellery fractured further. Senior officers were executed or sent to concentration camps, while minor clerical staff were scrutinized more closely than ever. The secretary's access to confidential communications became simultaneously more dangerous and more significant. She noted instructions concerning the movement of the Volkssturm militia and coded references to planned scorched earth strategies as the Allies advanced. Information that would later provide historians with rare glimpses into the desperate measures of a collapsing regime. The reveal of her observations was particularly striking when she documented orders that conflicted with known historical accounts. Some memoranda indicated covert negotiations with industrialists and officials in neutral countries, suggesting that the Reich was exploring escape routes or clandestine alliances as its territory shrank. She carefully recorded references to secret meetings, ambiguous instructions, and the unexplained disappearance of individuals tasked with managing critical wartime communications. Each note raised new questions about the depth of secrecy and deception within the government, illustrating the invisible machinery of fear and control operating behind the public facade of Nazi Germany. Despite the heightened risk, the secretary developed a methodical approach to preserving her records. She hid papers within ordinary files, used coded annotations, and memorized critical points in case her physical ledger was discovered. Her work demonstrated a remarkable awareness of both historical significance and personal danger. In one entry, she noted, "To survive is to vanish in plain sight. To remember is to defy the invisible hand." This quiet courage allowed her to document operations, disappearances, and political manipulations that might otherwise have been lost to history. By summer 1944, the Allied invasion was imminent. Berlin's streets buzzed with rumors of sabotage, internal dissent, and the looming threat of occupation. The secretary's ledger had grown into a detailed record of conflicting orders, internal purges, and covert strategies, an archive that captured the fractures within Hitler's government. As air raid sirens wailed and staff shuffled under strict surveillance, she faced the delicate task of preserving her notes while continuing her duties. Each day brought new orders, new disappearances, and fresh evidence that history was being written in whispers behind closed doors. As the D-Day landings approached in June 1944, the secretary's position grew ever more precarious. The information she had quietly gathered could illuminate the hidden workings of the Reich, yet its survival was uncertain. She understood that the collapse of Berlin was inevitable and that the ledger she maintained might one day be the only surviving testimony of decisions and actions concealed from the public. And so, as the city braced for invasion and the inner circle of the Führer spiraled deeper into paranoia, a pressing question loomed. What would become of the records she had so painstakingly preserved, and who would live to tell the story of the secrets they contained? As 1945 began, The Third Reich teetered on the edge of collapse. Allied forces had liberated France, crossed the Rhine, and were advancing inexorably toward Berlin. The Soviet Red Army pressed from the east, leaving the German capital encircled in a deadly vice of artillery, bombs, and the panic of a government in disarray. Within this chaos, Hitler's secretary continued her daily work, fully aware that the regime she served was unraveling, and that each passing day brought new threats, not only from the enemy outside but from the internal machinations and purges of a desperate Führer. Her meticulous ledger, once a quiet record of administrative anomalies, now became a chronicle of a city and a government in freefall. The human struggle during this period was stark and immediate. Civilians fled the city in droves, buildings lay in ruins from Allied air raids, and the streets of Berlin were riddled with soldiers on edge and civilians caught in the crossfire. Units such as the German 9th Army and remnants of the 12th Army attempted to slow the Soviet advance, but coordination had disintegrated, supplies were scarce, and morale had collapsed. In the Chancellery, the secretary witnessed the last desperate orders being issued, some clearly impractical, others never reaching their intended units. Her diary entries reflected the tension. Commands fly into the void. No one listens, no one answers. The Reich dies quietly, and yet the walls still whisper. Amid this turmoil, the disappearances she had been observing for years became more pronounced. Senior aides, officers, and clerical staff simply vanished, sometimes under orders to flee, sometimes through mysterious circumstances that were never explained. Her notes captured these anomalies in real time, names crossed out, positions left unfilled, and documents marked with cryptic annotations. She also documented conversations suggesting covert plans for escape, the evacuation of high-ranking officials, and the safeguarding of sensitive materials. Even as Berlin burned around her, she continued to hide and preserve her records, aware that they were now among the few remaining traces of the inner workings of Hitler's regime. The reveal of her ledger's significance became painfully clear in retrospect. Historians examining surviving fragments later noted the value of her observations. They provided corroboration for intelligence reports, insights into the secret movements of SS units, and glimpses of political negotiations never publicly acknowledged. Among the pages she preserved were references to attempts to move treasures, archives, and personnel to safer locations, as well as notes on high-level disappearances that contradicted official wartime records. Every entry raised further questions. Who orchestrated these disappearances, and how many of the Reich's most sensitive secrets vanished with them? By April 1945, the Red Army had breached Berlin, and Allied bombing had left the city in ruins. The secretary's life, once precarious in the context of bureaucratic observation, now teetered on the edge of existential danger. With streets controlled by soldiers and militias, and with the Gestapo and SS increasingly absent or fleeing, her position became even more perilous. Yet despite the immediate threat, she managed to safeguard her ledger, hiding it within innocuous files, memorizing key entries, and leaving hints that might one day allow it to be found. Then, in the final days of April, she disappeared. The circumstances are unclear. Some accounts suggest she was evacuated, others that she vanished into the rubble, blending into the chaos of a city collapsing under artillery and fire. What is certain is that her ledger survived in fragments, discovered later by Allied intelligence officers and historians piecing together the remnants of Berlin's secret history. The materials she left behind revealed the complex tapestry of internal operations, purges, and clandestine activities, yet many questions remained unresolved. Her life, lived quietly in the shadows, became both a mystery and a testament to the silent witnesses of history. As the Third Reich crumbled and the Allies secured victory, the secretary's disappearance underscored the fragility of human memory and the impermanence of documents in wartime. What she recorded, though incomplete, provided unparalleled insight into the inner workings of Hitler's administration during its final, frantic months. Her story became a haunting reminder of the countless individuals whose contributions to history went unseen, whose voices were swallowed by war, yet whose careful observations could one day illuminate truths hidden from the public eye. The question lingered: how much of history remained buried with those who vanished, and how many secrets had been lost forever in the final chaos of Berlin? After the fall of Berlin in May 1945, the Allies began a painstaking process of cataloguing the remnants of the Third Reich. Among the rubble of government buildings and the scattered archives of Hitler's administration, fragments of one particularly remarkable record began to surface. Portions of a ledger meticulously kept by a secretary whose name would remain largely anonymous. Her documentation offered rare insight into the inner workings of the Reich, revealing patterns of disappearances, covert operations, and the minute manipulations of power that had gone unnoticed by both contemporary observers and historians for decades. These pages became a key, if incomplete, window into the hidden corridors of Nazi authority, a testament to a life spent quietly witnessing history. The human story behind these records was striking. The secretary had survived years of high-stakes observation, maintaining her careful notes while navigating a treacherous environment of fear and suspicion. She had observed the movements of military units like the Sixth Army, the internal purges following the July 20th plot, and the secretive assignments of the SS, all while remaining invisible to those around her. Her personal reflections, often terse yet precise, captured both the mundane and extraordinary elements of life within Hitler's inner circle. One entry, dated just days before her disappearance, read, "History moves too fast to record everything. I write what I can, and trust that someone will understand the shadows." The reveal of her ledger in the post-war period proved invaluable to both Allied intelligence and historians. Fragments recovered from offices in the Chancellery corroborated operational details about troop deployments, internal purges, and clandestine meetings previously unknown. They illuminated inconsistencies between official Nazi communiques and actual events on the ground, such as discrepancies in the timing of military reinforcements or the unexplained vanishing of officers and clerical staff. Some of her observations suggested covert diplomatic overtures to neutral nations like Sweden and Spain, highlighting the desperate attempts of the Reich to secure strategic advantages even in its final months. Yet much remained unresolved. Many portions of her ledger were never recovered, and the true extent of her knowledge remains uncertain. Scholars and intelligence analysts have debated the potential significance of the missing pages. What operational secrets, what clandestine agreements, or what internal failures they might have documented. Her life, though largely invisible, had become a focal point for understanding the hidden machinery of Hitler's administration. In essence, she became both witness and enigma, a single clerk whose careful attention preserved fragments of a vast and secretive system. Her story also offered modern lessons in courage and observation. Operating in an environment of extreme surveillance and paranoia, she demonstrated a remarkable ability to record, preserve, and analyze information without attracting attention. The meticulous care she took in safeguarding her notes underlines the role that ordinary individuals can play in documenting history, even when their contributions are initially overlooked. Her work serves as a reminder that behind the monumental events of war lie countless silent observers, whose quiet diligence may one day illuminate the hidden truths of history. As historians and intelligence experts pieced together her findings, the narrative of the Third Reich became richer, more nuanced, and more complex. Her ledger highlighted the interplay between secrecy, obedience, and fear within Nazi Germany, showing how even the smallest roles, those of clerks, secretaries, and aides, could yield insights into the broader operations of a totalitarian state. Though the secretary herself disappeared into the chaos of Berlin's final days, the fragments of her work endure, providing both illumination and mystery. Each page raises as many questions as it answers, reminding us that history is often recorded in whispers, hidden in plain sight, and waiting for someone to uncover it. The legacy of the secretary, known only through her secret pages, is thus one of quiet defiance and careful observation. Her life lived in whispers became a key to understanding the silent, often invisible currents that shaped the outcome of World War II. And while her fate remains unknown, her contributions continue to speak across time, challenging historians and the public alike to consider the hidden narratives that exist behind every monumental event. In the end, the secret pages she left behind are more than documents. They are a testament to the power of memory, vigilance, and the enduring pursuit of truth, even in the darkest chapters of human history.